1 hour away, it is 3.5 hours away or 3 hours 56 minutes away. The point I'm making is you have to focus on the fundamentals and you have to project them as correctly as possible. Now we all know, the entrepreneur knows, the investor knows that what you're projecting for 5 years, no one can project with any sense of accuracy. And we all have our own factors to discount it. But if the assumptions you're making going in seem to be incorrect, then that acts as a big negative in the evaluation of the business plan. That was just one point. One more point I want to make on, I talked about the entrepreneur being 60-70% of the criteria to fund. And Sudhanva mentioned early stage funding is not easy to raise. It's not easy to raise because you have nothing at that time. Maybe you bootstrap, you have very little to show, etc., etc. But what do we look for at that time is, I mentioned the entrepreneurial team. It's easy to say passion, dedication, commitment and all that stuff, but what does it all mean? And KSV said if a proposal comes, would you look at it? Absolutely would look at it. And to help you, that is any entrepreneur here in this room, as to what criteria we would look for, I would strongly recommend you read this poem called If by Rudyard Kipling. Have any of you heard of this poem? Yeah. How many potential entrepreneurs, how many entrepreneurs in this room? Okay. And how many want to be entrepreneurs? Okay, if your bosses are here, don't raise your hands, it's okay. But okay. So my strong advice would be read the poem called If. The first line, it starts with, if you can hold your head when all around you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. And it goes on to outline, in fact, I'm very clear, I'm totally convinced, Rudyard Kipling had kept an entrepreneur in front of him as he was writing this poem, because each and every word and sentence in that poem describes what an ideal entrepreneur should be. And if you read that poem and come to us, your proposal will be looked at that much more favorably.
While speaking to all of you, one thought came in, a lot of good things are actually happening, currently speaking, in Mysore and IT. I know the work which EX and Sudhanva has put into the number of people he has. Yesterday I spent some time with some of the entrepreneurs who have the finishing schools in Mysore, which is getting these people trained across. I know the large infrastructure management center which Vikram has set up in medical area. Likewise, the multiple things are there. My fear is, that's a request I have from Vikram and others, is we are not possibly showcasing all the good work happening in Mysore to the rest of the world. So I would urge, today's world media has got extensive power to change opinion, change perception. You can start publishing all the good work that is happening in Mysore, and Mysore gets right place, destination, illustrative places, the work what is taking place. Bangalore, for all reasons, get all the messages, even whether you represent or not represent. Right place, Mysore requires the messaging, positive messaging, whatever you do, a long way to go across. So if there are any questions you may like to address to the panel, just introduce yourself and that will be useful. Yeah, there's a mic coming from behind for yourself. Yeah, there's one.
Dr. B. Gopal Singh, teaching economics and management. This is not a question but an observation. One FDI investor has been asked why you want to invest in India. The answer which he gave is equally applicable to Mysore also. We came here for the cost consideration because it's cheaper. Then we were able to concentrate on quality, and finally we are able to make innovation. This is equally applicable to Mysore, mainly because always we speak of infrastructure. We say in Mysore we have got a lot of educational infrastructure, but at the same time, I should also submit that here is a city where we are able to get a lot of funds from NARM, JNRM, Jawaharlal Nehru Urban Renewal Mission, through which we are able to improve the transportation facilities. But what we are lacking today is that we are unable to complete the ring road in Mysore, and we now need the second ring road in Mysore. Mysore has got a lot of potential for medical tourism, where we can make a lot of research here. For considering the management and research activities here, we have a lot of MBA colleges where we can carry on all these activities. So these are my observations. And further, we say about infrastructure, we have a lot of financial infrastructure here also. There are diversified financial institutions where they can cater to the needs of the industry. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, my name is Krishnamurthy. I'm been in a software company in Bangalore. This question is to Mr. Sudhanva. Very specifically, for an average company, if you were to either move operations or set up the next operations in Mysore instead of Bangalore, what percentage of cost advantage in operating costs can one expect? Is there an advantage?
I should admit, cost efficiencies are more in a place like Noida, where we have set up 2 development centers. Surprisingly, and many of you would be surprised that the lease rentals, for instance, in a place like Noida, when we leased our first development center, was a fraction of what it costs in Mysore. Obviously, the wage levels could be marginally higher, but overall, there are cost efficiencies outside of Mysore as well. So, hope that answers the question in as diplomatic manner as I could.
Just between Bangalore and Mysore?
Sorry?
Just between Bangalore and Mysore, if you compare? If you don't want to go all the way to Noida?
Well, the biggest advantage of Mysore is if you can get hold of land which you can own and construct your own facility. Then obviously the total cost of operations in Mysore is about 30% lower than in Bangalore. In terms of wages, I think we've bridged the gap. There's hardly any gap anymore.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Vikram from Deccan. As we have written in a paper today also, this is about 9 years back we are talking about. And for the first time then I heard about venture capital. Then Mr. Kumar was the name that was being bandied about then as the venture capitalist. 9 years down the line, I don't know whether there is anybody who has funded people from Mysore about this venture capital thing. Mr. Samir is here today. And nothing much has changed. Of course, the best thing that has happened is because I've been interacting. I was away in Bangalore for 7 years now, I've come back. And the joke that my friends cracked in from the IT, like Shankar Prasad and Venkatesh and all of them. Now that you have come back, let us do something. But the best thing that did happen is, people like Sudhanva grew, Venkatesh grew. So a lot of them have grown in these 9 years. And as Sudhanva rightly mentioned, he said that they had to grow and they did not have time to volunteer. So now I don't know how we are going to take Mysore forward and the venture capital scene in Mysore. Because as I told you, 9 years ago we had heard about venture capital. And after that, I don't know whether anything has happened.
Just one thing happened last time. You said some Kumar in 2002.
Kumar.
Now you are Samir Kumar.
Yeah, that's one thing common. That's good.
That's the only thing common. Kumar Malavalli has a great stature and nothing of his caliber. But I just want to say one thing. Venture capital comes where there are entrepreneurs. And it's a chicken and egg issue, but typically VCs will go where there are entrepreneurs. So I'll just give you the example we've seen of places like Hubli, which has built a very active entrepreneurial ecosystem. Inventus has still not invested there, but I won't be surprised if in the next year or two, Inventus actually ends up taking investments. There are some very good tech companies that I know of in Hubli. There is a very active Thai chapter there. Thai is the Indus entrepreneurs that sort of gets entrepreneurs together. That's how we've gone. This is the first time I'm coming to Mysore for an event like this. But I've gone to Hubli twice. My partner's gone to Hubli. Kanwal has gone to Hubli. So we've made 3 visits to Hubli in that sense. Indian Angel Network, which is based in Delhi and Bangalore, has actually invested in a company in Hubli. So, that whole ecosystem is beginning to happen. It takes time, but it needs as much of local effort as for people to come here. Now, Sudhanva is a classic example of a person who actually raised VC money and made money for his investors. I was just telling him, I'm meeting him for the first time, but I've heard a lot about him. I was just telling him that we have been using Excelsoft shamelessly when we were raising our funds, saying, you can make venture investments in India and you can make money in those venture investments. And there's a Mysore guy who we are talking about, not a Bangalore guy. So you have the seeds of whatever is required to create that entrepreneurial ecosystem. But I think the local entrepreneurial community will have to take the initiative. VCs won't come, if there are no entrepreneurs. But if entrepreneurs get together and call VCs, will gladly come. I must make one statement. We are not just hungry to look for entrepreneurs. We are desperate to look for good entrepreneurs.
Yes, sir.
This is a question for Vikram. On the one side of the government, I think we're talking about making Mysore as a heritage city. Building Rajmargas everywhere. It looks more or less like a palace everywhere. And here, Praveen talked about calling this in 2020 as a digital user experience. 2.0. How are you going to bridge this gap now? How are you going to convince the government? Because a lot of the infrastructure has to come from the government. Private sector can't really do much. Although they can contribute in their own way and run the business, but most of the infrastructure has to come from the government. How are you going to bridge the gap between heritage city versus digital user experience city?
Well, me and Sudhanva had a discussion a couple of days ago anyways, that personally I prefer Mysore to remain as a tourist destination rather than an IT city. But there's nothing wrong in a tourist destination having a couple of good IT companies. Okay, so that's where I come from. So the point being that very simple is what NASCOM can do first in Mysore to encourage this is real estate costs. Sudhanva was being very nice. He kept saying, if you get land, there is no land. I have personally applied for KITB land to start a press for ourselves. We never got it. And there are a lot of other things. Ultimately, the reason why policy is important and what NASCOM can play in this is to push for policies that enable entrepreneurs and IT companies to do well. A very simple example would be, I think if you are a product company, you as an IT company, you pay your service tax and VAT, if I'm correct. So even if you sell a product, you have VAT, but then you still have to pay a service tax, even though it's a product, it's not a service. So these are the things that you have to push the government to change. So if you want Mysore to be an IT hub, you have to push the government to actually, for the KITB to work and do its job, to give land to an entrepreneur or to an IT company and make sure they establish the company in 3 years. So whatever is on paper, there has to be some action plan there too. So as far as bridging the gap, I think once infrastructure comes in, Mysore will continue to be a heritage city, you can't help it. But the periphery of the city can always be it cannot be an IT city like you say Bangalore is, but we can have good IT companies and a well-established entrepreneurial setup in the city. I definitely think.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Sudhanva. Just before concluding, we decided to hold this event in NASCOM 2.0 at Mysore amongst all the places in Karnataka. But having spent time for the last 24 hours here, we don't want to go empty-handed from NASCOM perspective. I take the feedback what you said very seriously. What we will do, NASCOM and the key interest people is by end of the day, we will create a small Mysore 2.0 forum of about 8 to 10 people. Let's collect issues, see what could be done, identify the agents could execute. Along with NASCOM, let's create a vibrant Mysore 2.0 for IT company. We're committed to do this and we will do it. Thank you very much, all of you.
I request KSV to present the panelists with a mentor.